Okay, hello and welcome to our tutorial today on index and match. So, if you've been following along with the videos, you have been through VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP. And to add to VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP, I thought I'd throw in a little bit something special with index and match functions. So, what are the index and match functions? How do they work? How do they work together? And why would you use them? Well, first of all, you know VLOOKUP is pretty simple, right? Given a set of numbers, you could then say, well, let's say, for example, we plugged in a salary here of, let's say $15,000. Okay. Well, if we were just looking at the tax rates that you see in column B here, you could do a VLOOKUP that would then look for that $15,000 range, approximate it, and give you 6% back. That would be great. But the problem that we have here is that it's a graduated taxing scale in which you have different tax rates based on how much you make and how many years you've been making it, right? So year one, two, three, four, five, and so on. So in this case, you would need both a VLOOKUP and an HLOOKUP, and that's not going to work so well. So when you find yourself in a situation where you need both a vertical lookup and a horizontal lookup, you have to start thinking something different. V and H lookup won't nest well together. So in this case, you're going to need to look for index and match. Now, a couple things about index and match. The index function and the match functions are actually two separate functions, right? So I can jump in here and go index, that's its own function. And I can jump in here and go match. That's its own function as well. But in the business world, well, just in the world in general, index and match are actually used quite often together. They are nested together. Why is that? Well, that happens because index on its own is not that handy of a feature, and match on its own is also not that handy of a feature. They've got a couple niche things they can do, but on their own, they don't work that well together. So before we go into using them together, well, let me show you what index does on its own. So let me show you what index does. Index is an array formula. So if I give it an array like these tax ranges here, if I give it coordinates, it will return the specific number in those coordinates. So let's say I give it the coordinate of 1, 1. It's going to give me 6%. Okay. Now, where did that 6% come from? It came from right here. Okay. So if I jump in and I give it 1, 2, well, what do you think it's going to give? So if I can get in there, if I give it the coordinates 1, 2, it's going to return 5%. So how does index work? Well, here's how index works. You give it an array, like this entire set that I just gave it here. It's going to start in the upper left hand corner, and this would be coordinate 1, 1. All right, so row 1, cell 1. 1, 2, that would be row 1, cell 2. Row 3 would be row 1, cell 3. And what it is, it's the R1, C1 documentation or notation scheme that you'd use also if you were using Visual Basic, R1, C1. So first the row, then the column, and it's the actual numerical index number for that. So what index can do is if it's given coordinates, can return a value. Well, what's the flaw when it comes to that? Well, gosh, if I wanted to return this 10% here, I'm going to go 1 and then I'm going to go 3, 1, right? Well, in order to do that, by the time I've taken the time to go over and count 3, 1 to get that 10%, well, you know what? I might as well have just typed in 10%. So it's not very practical in the business world. That's where match comes in. So what does the match function do? Well, let's say we took that 10%, or let's say we took that $30,000. Well, let's plug in that $30,000. You know what? Let's do not 30 because that'll fall too easy for you. So let's do 25,000. Well, let's say I do the match function there. So let's see what match does. Now, what you'll see first of all is match from an argument standpoint looks an awful lot like VLOOKUP, right? What are the arguments of VLOOKUP? There's a lookup value. There's an array. Then there's a index number, which we don't have for match type, and then there'd be match type at the end. Well, match versus index, or excuse me, versus VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP, they're actually pretty similar when it looks to those arguments. What you'll see is that the match type at the end has an additional option, and you drop the index number. Okay, for if you were doing VLOOKUP. And just to compare, let me show you again. Oops, let's spell VLOOKUP correctly, huh? VLOOKUP. There you go. So if you look at the arguments for VLOOKUP, you have an extra, you have a column index number, and you've still got that range, but the first two arguments are the same. Lookup value, table array. Column index is dropped for match, and range lookup is actually still there. It's just called match type. So if I go back into the match function, and I pull up my insert function box, see match type, and you still have those two. Okay, so here's how this works. Let's do our match. Oop, I somehow deleted my equal sign. Let's do our match, and we're going to click the lookup value of 2500. Then it's going to ask for my array. Well, we're going to take the array that's got all the headings in it, 10,000 to 100,000. Okay. Our next step is it's going to say, do you want less than, exact, or greater than? Now that is slightly different from V and H lookup. Less than is the equivalent of an approximate, so it's going to go to the closest number and roll backwards. Exact would be an exact match. That would be a good use for words, or if you know that you're only going to hit exact values. Greater than, I personally don't use too much, but that is going to round up. Okay, so the default is less than if you don't have anything selected. So I'm going to go ahead and hit 1 anyway. And it's going to tell us, now it says 200%, but it's really 2. Okay, so what is 2 exactly? Well, here's what 2 is. You had 25,000. Let's look over here. 25,000 is greater than 10,000, greater than 20,000, but it's not greater than 30,000. So what did it do? It rolled back to 2, and it said that it's approximately larger or equal to the value in the second range of values. So what did it do? It found it where it falls in a rank, and it gave it a coordinate of 2. It told you where it is. Okay, so if you're thinking, what do you have? Well, you have a function that doesn't work very well because it kind of doesn't have a brain with index, and you have a function that can't return a value but can give you coordinates. So if you nest those two things together, all of a sudden you've got something that's going to work really well. So here's what we're going to do. Let's go back to that $25,000 a year, and let's say that we've been making that for 5 years. Okay, so you know the answer is going to be 2.3%, but wouldn't it be great to not have to look that up and to just go ahead and plug in 25K here, 5,000 there, and let that tax rate pop right in for you? Well, let's do that with index and match. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to open up with my index function. And remember, the index function is an array formula, so we're going to grab our entire array here. Now, you know, we could say 2, 5, and that would actually give us the answer, right? If I plug in a 2 and a 5 here, it would give us 2.3%. But you don't want to do that, because by the time I've done that, I could just look up 2.3%. So here's what I'm going to do. Instead of typing a 2, I'm going to use the match function. I'm nesting the match function inside the index function, and what that's going to do is that's going to give us the ability to automatically find that coordinate instead of us having to manually do it. So we're going to use match in replacement of row. So now we're going to go in and we're going to take that salary of $25,000, and we're going to take the lookup array of this set right here. Okay, we're going to take the salary, we're going to take the lookup array. Okay, the next thing we need to do is put in match type of less than. We close off the match function, hit comma, and you know what? We're back in index again for the column index number. Okay, columns are going across the top. So we're going to jump in here, we're going to do a match again. Now, why are we doing that? We're doing a match again so it can automatically look at this 5 to match up with these coordinates and then tell us, all right, we're going 5 over, or we're going 3 down, or so on and so forth. So my match type is going to be 5. Let me move the IntelliSense box over a little bit. There you go. And from there, we're going to take our array. Our array is going to be the column headings, like so. Then we need to put in our match type, which is less than again. We're going to close it off, and guess what? Now we're back in the index again. Index has been completed, so all we need to do is close it off one more time, and guess what? We get 2.3%. Why do we like this so much? Here's why we like it. If I go in and change that 5 to a 3, guess what? Control Enter, it's 4.3%. 25,000 is not greater than 30, but greater than 20,000. 3 years, 4.3%. What if we take that 25,000, make it 50,000? 5.2%, we find 50,000. We do it for 3 years, 5.2%. Hey, there you go. Index and match. We'll talk to you soon. Oh, we're going to stop the recording for real this time.